It's time for you to downsize, Martha, Chloe blurted out, bringing her coffee mug down on my oak dining table with a sharp thud. This house is just too much responsibility for you. I didn't look up from my knitting right away. I took a second to adjust the yarn, then looked at my daughter-in-law. She was sitting in the chair my late husband had built 20 years ago. Across from her, my son, Julian, was staring at his phone, completely mute, as if this conversation had absolutely nothing to do with him. They had moved in with me temporarily 2 years ago to save money. And little by little, their boxes and furniture had colonized every inch of my space. The stairs are dangerous at your age, Chloe continued, crossing her arms. Besides, Julian and I need the master bedroom. We're going to start a family soon, and you'd be so much more comfortable in a single-story apartment. We could sell this place, use the money to buy something in our names, and build a little mother-in-law suite out back for you. Silence settled over the kitchen. I could hear the hum of the refrigerator and the birds out in the garden I'd planted with my own 2 hands. I didn't feel angry. I didn't feel like crying. What I felt was a sudden, absolute clarity. They had stopped seeing me as the homeowner and started seeing me as an obstacle in their way. I'll think about it, I finally replied. My voice was so calm that Julian actually looked up, surprised I wasn't putting up a fight. Chloe smiled, looking awfully satisfied with herself, clearly thinking she'd won round 1. She got up, dumped her dirty mug in the sink, and marched out of the kitchen like she owned the place. Julian mumbled some unintelligible apology and followed her out. I just sat there, looking out the window at the garden. I wasn't going to be a burden to anyone, but I sure as hell wasn't going to be a pawn in my daughter-in-law's game either. That very afternoon, I started packing up my most valuable possessions. 3 days after that little kitchen chat, I came downstairs into the living room and noticed my husband's old rocking chair was missing from its spot by the fireplace. In its place, Chloe had put up this massive, ultra-modern floor lamp that completely clashed with the rest of the room. I searched the whole first floor until I found the rocking chair shoved in the garage, covered in dust, right next to Julian's toolboxes. I took a deep breath. I didn't go track down Chloe to chew her out. I didn't raise my voice. I just waited until she and my son left for the office, once the house was empty. I walked into the kitchen. I unplugged that ridiculously expensive $800 espresso machine Chloe had bought last month, carefully wrapped up the cord, and boxed it up. I did the same with her collection of imported teas and the glossy home decor magazines she always left scattered across my coffee table. I carried it all out to the garage and set it exactly in the corner where she dumped my rocking chair. Then, with a bit of elbow grease, I hauled the rocker back to its rightful place, in front of the fireplace. When Chloe got home that evening, I heard her stop dead in her tracks in the living room. "Martha," she called out, her voice pitching up. "Where's my espresso machine?" I strolled out of the kitchen, wiping my hands on a dish towel. "In the garage," I told her, looking her dead in the eye with total calm. It was taking up too much space in my kitchen. Chloe opened her mouth to argue, her face flushing bright red, but my expression didn't shift a millimeter. She realized I wasn't going to debate her. She spun on her heel and stomped off toward the garage. Dinner that night was eaten in a tense, heavy silence. But my rocking chair never moved again. The very next day, I made a phone call that would change everything. On Tuesday morning, while Julian and Chloe were at work, I welcomed a real estate agent named Meredith into my home. She walked through the rooms, tapping notes into her iPad, admiring the polished hardwood floors and the big bay windows that let in all that natural light. The property is in pristine condition, Mrs. Bennett, Meredith said, adjusting her glasses. In this housing market, it'll get snatched up fast. Are you in a rush to sell? I want this kept completely quiet, I explained, pouring her a glass of water. Showings will only happen between 10 a.m. and 2 p.m., Monday through Friday. No for sale sign in the front yard. And I strongly prefer all cash buyers. Meredith nodded, catching on immediately without asking any nosy questions. We agreed on an asking price, and I signed the initial listing paperwork right then and there on the exact same oak table where Chloe had suggested I pack my bags. That night at dinner, Chloe brought it up again. She'd grabbed some brochures for an assisted living complex just outside the city limits. Take a look at this. Martha, she said, sliding a glossy pamphlet next to my plate. They have knitting classes on Tuesdays and an on-call doctor. It's perfect for you. Julian and I are already touring some bigger houses in this area. If we sell this place soon, we can put down a really solid down payment. Julian stared a hole into his chicken, refusing to make eye contact with me. I picked up the brochure, glanced at it for a second, and set it aside. It looks very peaceful, I remarked, taking a bite of my dinner. Chloe flashed a smug smile at Julian, totally mistaking my lack of resistance for complete surrender. They had absolutely no idea that my house was officially on the market and that the first showing was scheduled for the very next day. The next few weeks were a masterclass in logistics. Meredith brought 3 different prospective buyers through the house while it was empty. My job was just to open the blinds, brew a little vanilla to make the place smell like home, and vanish into the backyard while the clients toured the rooms. Chloe eventually noticed the house was unusually spotless. One Friday evening after work, she ran her finger along the doorframe in the living room and gave an approving nod. I see you finally took dusting seriously. Martha, she said, dropping her purse on the sofa. It's good for you to stay active. Staging the house for when we sell it is super important. I didn't answer her. I was too busy packing my fine china into bubble-wrapped boxes and hiding them in the back of my closet. On Tuesday of the 3rd week, Meredith called me. A married couple, both doctors relocating to the local hospital, had fallen in love with the place. They were willing to pay the full asking price in cash, on the condition that we close in 15 days. Do we accept the offer? Meredith asked. I looked around the master bedroom I'd shared with my husband. I touched the wooden frame of our bed and took a deep breath. We accept, I said firmly. That same afternoon, I transferred a hefty chunk of my personal savings to cover the first month's rent and a $2,500 security deposit on a furnished 2-bedroom apartment downtown, about 20 minutes away. It wasn't for me. But as the clock started ticking toward closing day, I had to deal with one last piece of financial entitlement from my daughter-in-law. On Thursday afternoon, my phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. It was a fraud alert from my bank about an attempted charge of $4,500 at a high-end designer furniture store. The card attached to the charge was an authorized user card I had given Julian a long time ago for household emergencies, but which Chloe had permanently claimed for her own wallet. I didn't even blink. I opened my banking app, locked the card, and canceled it entirely. 2 hours later, Chloe burst through the front door, absolutely fuming. She threw her keys on the table and glared at me from the hallway. Your credit card declined at the furniture store, she snapped, her face tight with anger. I was humiliated in front of the salesperson. I was trying to buy the sectional sofa for the new house. I kept folding the cloth napkins I had just washed. I canceled the card, I replied, my voice completely level. Why would you do that? Julian interjected, walking in right behind her. Mom, we agreed we were going to use those funds to get a head start on furnishing the new place. I set the napkin down on the stack and looked at both of them. You agreed on that, I corrected gently. My money is no longer funding furniture I didn't pick out, for a house I won't be living in. If you want a new sofa, you can buy it with your own salaries. Chloe let out a harsh, sarcastic laugh. And what exactly are we supposed to do? Then we need to get ready for the move. Martha, you can't just be this selfish. I turned my back and walked over to the sink, ending the conversation right there. I wasn't about to get lectured on selfishness by a woman plotting to evict me from my own home. Behind me, I heard Chloe muttering something about my stubbornness, but she never tried to use the card again. The control was back in my hands, and I was only 10 days away from the grand finale. I started my own move in complete stealth mode. I rented a small storage unit a few miles down the road, and every morning, while Julian and Chloe were at work, I loaded a couple of boxes into my car. I took the photo albums, my husband's old tools, the paintings that actually meant something to me, and my winter coats. I slowly hollowed out the closets and shelves, rearranging what was left so the empty space wasn't obvious. Chloe didn't notice a thing. She was too busy scrolling through Zillow every night, looking at million-dollar homes she thought they'd be buying with my equity. One afternoon, while carrying a small box of my jewelry out to the car, I ran into my neighbor, Brenda. Going on a trip, Martha? She asked over the fence, leaning on her rake. Something like that. Brenda, just doing some spring cleaning, I replied, buckling the box into the back seat. By the way, there's going to be some moving trucks out here next week. Don't worry about the noise. Brenda gave me a look that was equal parts curious and knowing, and gave a slow nod. She'd always been a woman of few words, which I deeply appreciated. Inside the house, the atmosphere felt more alien every day. Chloe had invited some of her girlfriends over for wine that afternoon and was parading around like the lady of the manor, showing off the garden and talking about how she planned to tear up the patio if they didn't sell right away. I stayed up in my bedroom, reading a book, just soaking in the sheer irony of it all. We were only 4 days away from signing the final papers at the title company. Friday morning, I signed the closing documents at Meredith's office. The wire transfer into my personal bank account cleared within a matter of hours. That very same afternoon, I signed a lease on a gorgeous little condo right on the coast, about 3 hours away from the city. It was the exact spot my husband and I had always dreamed of retiring to. I got back to the house around noon. The sunlight was catching the dust motes floating in the living room. I sat in my rocking chair, totally alone, legally. The house wasn't mine anymore, but the contract gave me until Wednesday at 3 p.m. to hand over the keys and leave it empty. Saturday and Sunday were bizarre. Chloe and Julian were home all weekend. At one point, Chloe opened my hall closet looking for an extra throw blanket and frowned. "Hey, where are all your heavy coats?" she asked, eyeing the half-empty shelves. "I donated them." I half lied, never taking my eyes off my mug of tea. Like you said, at my age, I need to start letting things go and traveling light. She smiled, clearly thrilled by my apparent submission. "I'm so glad you're finally getting on board with this," she said, shutting the closet door. "Julian and I are going to tour a house tomorrow afternoon. We want you to see it soon to see if you like the guest room." "Of course." I nodded, keeping a completely straight face. That was the last real conversation we ever had under that roof. Monday morning, the second they left for work, I picked up the phone and called the moving company I'd booked the week before. The plan was about to be executed flawlessly. Wednesday dawned bright and clear. At 8 a.m., Julian and Chloe drove off to work. At 8:15 a.m., the moving truck backed into my driveway. I gave the movers very specific instructions. Everything in the guest bedroom. Julian's expensive sound system, the espresso machine out in the garage, and all their bathroom boxes belonged to them. The crew was fast and methodical. They loaded up my son and daughter-in-law's lives in under 3 hours and drove it all straight to the furnished downtown apartment I had rented for 30 days. Around noon, a second, smaller truck pulled up to take the rest of my essential furniture, heading straight for my new coastal condo. I left the keys to the downtown apartment on the kitchen island of my old house, tucked inside a crisp white envelope with Julian's name written on it in my cursive. The house was empty. The echo of my footsteps bounced off the bare walls. At exactly 3 p.m., Meredith arrived with the new owners, the married doctors. I handed over the keys with a genuine smile. "I hope you'll be incredibly happy here." I told them. The husband thanked me and, right then and there, pulled a brand new set of deadbolts out of his briefcase. "We make it a habit to change the locks on day one," the wife explained apologetically. "I think that's incredibly smart," I replied. I explained that my son would be stopping by later and that I'd left an envelope for him on the kitchen counter. The husband went inside, grabbed it, and promised to hand it over personally when they showed up. I got into my car, rested my hands on the steering wheel, and took a deep breath. I started the engine and drove away without once looking in the rearview mirror. I was sitting out on the balcony of my new place, feeling the ocean breeze on my face, when my cell phone rang. It was 6:30 p.m. The caller ID flashed Chloe's name. I let it ring 3 times before I answered. "Hello," I answered, my voice steady. "Martha, where are you?" Chloe's voice was trembling with a mix of outrage and pure panic. "We just got to the house and our key won't work." And some strange man opened the door and handed us an envelope. "What the hell is going on?" "I sold the house, Chloe," I said, watching the sun start to dip below the ocean horizon. There was a dead, stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then, I heard Julian yelling in the background, demanding to know what was happening. "What do you mean you sold it?" Chloe shrieked. "All our stuff is gone. That guy says he owns the place." "He does," I stated. "We closed today. The envelope he gave you has the keys to a 2-bedroom apartment downtown. I paid the first month's rent in advance and had all your things moved there this morning. You have 30 days to figure out your own living situation." "You can't do this," Chloe sobbed, her whole facade of control completely shattering. "We were house hunting together. That equity was for our future." "No, Chloe, that money was mine. The house was mine," I cut in. I didn't raise my voice, but I spoke with a tone that left absolutely no room for debate. "You two wanted me to downsize, so I did. Now it's time for you to take charge of your own lives." I hung up before she could say another word and powered off my phone. Night fell over the water, and for the first time in years, I felt absolute, unbroken peace. It was 6 weeks before I saw Julian again. He made the 3-hour drive from the city out to the coast and showed up on my doorstep on a Sunday morning. He came alone. I invited him in. He stood in the middle of my small, sunlit living room, taking in the new potted plants by the windows and his father's rocking chair. positioned perfectly to face the balcony. I poured him a fresh cup of coffee and handed it to him. "It's a beautiful place." "Mom," he finally said, perching on the edge of the sofa. He looked exhausted, as if the last 30 days had given him a crash course in how the real world actually works. "It is," I agreed, settling into my rocking chair. "How are things at the new apartment?" "Chloe is still furious. We had to sign a lease on a place much smaller than we wanted," he mumbled, staring into his mug. "I'm really sorry about how things went down. I guess we just took it for granted that you'd always be there to fix everything for us." I didn't comfort him. I didn't tell him that all was instantly forgiven. Actions have consequences, and he needed to learn to live with his. "My door is always open for a visit. Julian. But my life and my choices belong to me." He nodded, finally understanding the invisible but ironclad boundary I'd drawn between us. We drank our coffee in silence, listening to the crash of the waves in the distance. I held no bitterness in my heart, only a profound sense of relief. At the end of the day, my daughter-in-law had been right about one thing: it was time for me to downsize. And it turned out to be the best decision of my life. Sometimes, out of love for our family, we surrender so much space that we end up becoming supporting characters in our own stories. What this experience taught me is that peace of mind and personal dignity are strictly non-negotiable, not even for your own children. You don't need to scream, get dragged into endless arguments, or plot malicious revenge when people start treating you like a burden or an ATM. The greatest act of self-love is knowing exactly when to step away and redraw your boundaries through quiet, decisive action. Letting other people face the consequences of their own entitlement isn't selfish. It's simply realizing that your season of sacrificing everything for everyone else has finally come to an end. Ultimately, the most valuable lesson is remembering that you don't need anyone's permission to decide how, where, and with how much peace you want to live out the rest of your days. Independence isn't always about making noise. Sometimes, it's just taking the keys to your own life and changing the locks.